Well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Reagan. Today's September 20th, and we have a lot to catch up on. First off, Karen, hit him with the COVID update.
More than 280,000 COVID hospitalizations this past summer could have been prevented by vaccinations. And then listen to this. The medical bills for those patients totaled more than $5 billion.
Hotspots this past week included West Virginia, Pennsylvania, and Tennessee. The major underlining story of this report was that none of the world's major economies, including the entire G20, have a climate plan that meets their obligations under the 2015 Paris Climate Accord, according to analysts published Wednesday, despite scientists warning that deep cuts to greenhouse gas emissions are needed now. President Biden went to California to tour the wildfire damage, and oh boy, look at this billboard.
Putting up 15 more billboards across the state showing Joe Biden and the caption,
According to CNN, most Americans feel that democracy is under attack in this country, 56%, according to a new CNN poll conducted by the SSRS, as 51% say it is likely that elected officials in the U.S. will successfully overturn the results of a future election because their party did not win. Also in the great degenerate states of America, rising costs of energy and food made inflation rise again in August, especially gas, clothing, and food. To top it off, we have a shortage of school bus drivers this year. Much too difficult to miss the border crisis at the Del Rio border in Texas, as 14,000 or so Haitians tried to cross into America but end up only cast under a bridge and eventually to be deported.
Dirt path by the hundreds, by the way, is what we're seeing, only to make their way to a bridge that already has more than 9,500 people already waiting. And if you look closely at these images, you'll see that there are some resources there. You see porta potties for them. These are women, children.
Your tax dollars went to good use this week as the U.S. military murdered 10 civilians in an Afghan Kabul drone strike. Also, 3 Chinese astronauts lived in space 90 days, then got back home this past week. Putin went into quarantine because someone in his inner circle got coronavirus. Yet another highlight this week was that the UK, Australia, and US announced a pact to counter China and will let Australia build their first nuclear-powered submarine. This angered France as they withdrew their ambassador to the United States.
AUKUS pact, and it's being seen as an effort to counter China's rapidly rising influence in that region. Analysts are describing it as one of the biggest defense partnerships in decades. The pact will allow Australia to build nuclear-powered submarines for the first time using technology provided by the U.S.
Tensions are ramping up on the North-South Korean peninsula as North Korea tested a new long-range cruise missile capable of hitting Japan undetected by radar systems. This is despite their country getting hit by food shortages and the virus at the same time. And then following this, North Korea tested another 2 ballistic missiles, which is a breach of UN treaty rules, after South Korea tested a missile from a submarine and an airplane. The North followed up by admitting that they tested these missiles, which were railway-borne missiles, the following day. Crazy tense over there. Kim is evidently all about that tiki for his bunghole. Lebanon is still collapsing from all sides as their energy and food crisis intensifies. Yet another highlight this week was the United Nations World Meteorological Association admitting on Thursday that the world is likely to miss climate targets related to 1.5 degrees Celsius.
The pace of climate change has not been slowed down by the global health crisis. The United Nations made the declaration on Thursday, adding that the world is still behind in its battle to cut carbon emissions. Petri Talas is Secretary General of the World Meteorological Organization.
There's been classically thinking that perhaps in the future something may happen, but it's obvious that we have to start acting already now if we want to reach the low limit of Paris Agreement.
Also mentioned in their report is that global goals needed to meet inequality, injustice, and climate change face a $100 trillion funding shortfall and are likely to be missed unless 10% of the global economic output is directed to UN targets every year to 2030. They said that the planet is careening towards a warming of 2.7 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels, far above what scientists say the world should be targeting, according to the Global Emissions Framework target. Scientists have said that the planet needs to slash 45% of its emissions by 2030 to reach carbon neutrality by mid-century. But under current emissions commitments from countries, there will be in fact a 16% increase in emissions in 2030 compared to 2010 levels, according to the report. But then I ask, what about the aerosol masking effect? No doubt young people are feeling anxious about climate change and say governments are failing them.
Now, millions of people on multiple continents skipped work and class today, demanding world leaders take action on climate change.
And many of the demonstrators were young students.
According to a study published Tuesday in the Lancet Planetary Health, of those surveyed, nearly 60% reported that they felt either very or extremely worried about climate change, and more than half said that climate change made them feel afraid, sad, anxious, angry, powerless, helpless, and or guilty. This is what we're doing to our children. Researchers with the UK's University of Bath and other schools spoke to 10,000 people in 10 countries, all of whom were between the ages of 16 and 25, to gauge how they feel about climate change. As one 16-year-old included in the study wrote, "I think it's different for young people. For us, the destruction of the planet is personal." Personally, I've just chosen to be a doomer wizard. The Safe and Affordable Housing Organization sold thousands of homes to flood-prone areas. Yes, HUD, as they're called, sold houses from 2017 to 2020 with flood rates 70 times higher than regular. According to the World Bank, climate change could trigger a migration of 216 million people. Yes, the report, called Groundswell 2.0, modeled the impacts of climate change on 6 regions, including that climate migration hotspots will emerge as soon as 2030 and intensify by 2050, hitting the poorest parts of the world hardest. Sub-Saharan Africa alone could account for 86 million of the internal migrants, with 19 million more in North Africa, the report showed, while 40 million migrants were expected in South Asia and 49 million in East Asia and the Pacific. Where are you going to put and feed all these people? Does this Groundswell report even mention the effects of cascading collapsing infrastructure on already developed nations? Too late. Again, Biden addressed the nation on Friday and world leaders, saying that it is now the time to boost climate pledges because we're playing catch up on the past 10-15 years of inaction.
At an inflection point, and that there's a real consensus that while the climate crisis poses an existential threat, we have to bring to Glasgow our highest possible ambitions. Those that have not yet done so, time is running out. The goal of limiting and warming to 1.5 degrees slips through our hands, and that is a disaster. The finding from the new Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change represents a code red for humanity. And the time to act is really narrowing, as the Secretary just pointed out, to get too close to a point of no return. We don't have a lot of time.
Speaking of corporate, Facebook knows that Instagram is toxic for teen girls. Company documents shows. Its own in-depth research shows a significant teen mental health issue that Facebook plays down in public. So keep liking and keep scrolling. Watermelon Celsius is the best, by the way. Way better than Jolly Ranchers. SpaceX launched a successful civilian rocket that did experiments in space, among other things. And about 700 people showed up to the Capitol for the Justice for J6 rally. That's the insurrection on the U.S. Capitol in America, in case you don't know. On to more weather events. Tropical Storm Nicholas pounded the southeast and Texas, Louisiana coast. It was the 14th named storm, and we usually don't hit that number till mid-November. Shanghai was hit by Typhoon Shanfu, the second typhoon there this season. All of this is a teaser trailer for what is to come. Soon we'll be having catastrophic, paralyzing weather events weekly. More fire. Spain deploys almost 1,000 military emergency workers against their wildfires. Hurricane Ida displaced hundreds of graves. Now that's pure hell. Can you imagine that? Yet more fire. The Sequoia National Forest in California is under threat of a new wildfire threatening to obliterate one of the world's largest trees on Earth. In fact, the largest tree, the Sherman tree. The fires are burning in steep, rugged terrain. Last year, 14% of them burned, and now they're wrapping them with fire-resistant foil. These trees are 8,000 years old, and we're burning them with human activity. At what point do we cross the threshold into hell? Because I feel like we're already there. We, us humans, and animals are in a worldwide planetary emergency. And we'll top it off with a note from James Hansen himself, who says that the rate of global warming during the next 25 years could be double what it was in the past 50, and says that we will be way past 2 degrees by 2040. So congratulations, you made it this far in the video. I can't tell you how much my patrons and commenters, all of you, mean to this channel and this program to keep public journalism going. Thank you so much for watching. My name is Reagan. This is what's happening in the world. I hope you enjoyed and you have a splendid day. I'll talk to you next week.